Excellent.
So today I'd like to welcome to the show Gerald J Leonard, who is a professional bassist and has a unique approach in accomplishing more productivity in the workplace. He's the CEO of Principles of Execution and a certified minority business enterprise and a strategic project portfolio management and culture change consultancy practice with over 20 years of experience working with large federal government organizations and multinational corporations. And Gerald's come to talk to me today about his new book, Workplace Jazz, and how to improvise. So welcome to the show, Gerald.
Nigel, thanks so much for having me. I'm really grateful to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. So Workplace Jazz. Well, I'll be frank. When I got the message through, that I've got someone who's a bass player wanting to come on the show, and with me being an amateur, very poor bass player hack, it kind of made me think, got to get you on, got to get you on.
Okay.
And having had a look at the book, and for people to see that's what the book looks like for our YouTube videos. Not very good for radio, but great for YouTube when I put it up on there. Um, I thought got to talk to you. I've had some thoughts myself before now about how music and how projects and business kind of have that flow. But
Right.
I'll be honest, as I always say, I haven't read the whole book yet, but I've started looking at different bits of it and started going, yeah, I can see that. That's um, piqued my interest immediately with the way that you've
Okay.
talked about it. So, what do you want to tell us? I gave you that intro. Do you want to tell us a little bit about you and your background, and then we can delve into what we do and how we improve cultures within organizations?
Excellent. Excellent. Well, as you said, I'm a musician, I'm a bass player, and I started out honestly playing guitar at 10 years old. In fact, I talk about this in my TEDx talk, and then I tell this story a little bit in the beginning of the book. That I was sneaking into my sister's room when she wasn't there to grab her guitar to play it because I
Nice.
was actually taking piano lessons. My older sister played piano. I was supposed to take piano lessons. I really didn't like it as much, but I was really intrigued with my sister's guitar. And it's like this little red toy guitar. But one day she caught me playing it, and she decided to let me have it. Now that can be two ways, right?
Yeah.
As a sister, let you have it, and she also let me you know, just have the instrument because it wasn't something that she was going to play. I fell in love with playing. And within a year or so, I joined a band. And now one of the guys in the band was, I think at the time he was 14 years old. He sounded like Jimi Hendrix, no joke, at that time.
Uh,
And I knew at that point, I'm not the guitar player for the band. And so I switched to playing bass.
yeah.
And as you know, when you're playing bass, you have to know the whole song. You got to know the bridge. You got to know the chorus. You're the foundation of the music because everybody else is kind of doing their thing, but you're holding down the bottom and you're kind of setting the pace of how things go.
It's kind of I always
So
say to drummer friends of mine that the bass player keeps the drummer in time.
exactly. Exactly. And so, I mean, and there was a time in Lakeland, Florida in the United States where they had just opened something called the Lakeland Civic Center. And so so imagine being this 12-year-old kid, playing this instrument, and you're getting to see Lewis Johnson. These are various bass players. You're getting
Mm.
to see Bootsy Collins. You're getting to see all these phenomenal bass players back in the 70s and 80s
Yeah.
that you hear about that kind of set the foundation for R&B and so on and so forth. And I got into jazz and so on. And I went to college and in graduate school. So interesting story is that after I got married and had kids, I really didn't want to be on the road as much. And so I switched careers and got into IT. And it was around a time where if you could spell IT, you could get in. And so what was interesting about it was, I had developed some leadership skills from some volunteering, some work I had done with the church. And the interesting thing is I've always played music along with anything else I did. And so when I switched to be there for my kids and to raise them and so on and so forth, I kept playing. I played orchestras, I played shows, I played different venues and so on and so forth in the New York City, Westchester area. Well, as things would go on, I realized, do I go back and get another master's degree because I'd already done my master's? Found myself, kind of pursuing certifications. And that led me to really grow in business in a way that I think if I just went back to school, I wouldn't have.
Hmm.
But again, I was playing. So I started having these experiences where, on one hand, I'm playing music and working with a band. On another hand, I'm going and working with clients and doing business and then, project management. I started getting
Yeah.
into project management and so on and so forth. And what I started noticing was how much a really good project for business felt more like being in a band,
Yeah.
because in the project world or in a band, let's go there, everyone works together. Everyone is really serious about their instrument, right? I mean,
Mm.
if you're going to be a drummer, you got to woodshed, you got to practice. You're going to be a piano player, guitar player, whatever you're playing, you're that's your instrument that you got to hold down. But to make the music work, what do you have to do? You got to listen. In
Mm.
fact, one of the things we do as musicians is we spend hours and hours and hours by ourselves listening to records or listening to ourselves play in the language of music, right? And so as a band, we do that. And so what I found was that really good business groups would have the same mentality where, you have a business developer, you have a software developer, you have an analyst, you have a QA person, you have an infrastructure engineer, or you have the business lead or whatever. And for the project to go well, everyone had to work together as a really cohesive team.
Yeah.
But one of the most important things is they had to listen to each other. And just like when you're playing the jazz, as I got older into music, I played jazz, where you're playing and one person solos and one person everyone else is kind of supporting that person. And then somebody else solos and everybody else is supporting that person. Well, in business, it was almost the same,
Yeah.
where one person's leading and then everyone else is kind of supporting them. And I'm sure as you're listening and you're thinking about what you've done, if you've played music or if you're with your business, you're thinking probably the best projects that you've ever been on is when the team is really cohesive. They kind of have a vibe going on. They become more than friends. They become family in the way they treat each other, and they really support each other, and they know when to ask for help and when to give help. So that's really
Yeah.
how I got started in coming up with these concepts of, my first book, Culture is the Base, and my second book, Workplace Jazz. And that's how I came up with these concepts of just seeing the similarities between those two parts of my life.
Brilliant. It's funny, as you're saying there, I just thinking about it. And I've used this phrase before now. When you had a project team or a number of people who've worked together in
Right.
different, like, of portfolio management and things like that, and when sometimes we've got situations where we'll go to the different areas and then we'll come back together at a certain time because our paths cross again and we start working
Exactly.
on the same thing. And I've used the phrase, we're getting the band back together. It's kind of the old classic sort of cliche thing, and it's that kind. It is that kind of feeling, isn't it, where you've got those people who were you were part of a team and you felt like you were successful, it was working, and it clicks,
Right.
doesn't it? And I,
Yes.
and again, the more you think about it, you think of, I go to the parodies in my mind of Spinal Tap and things like that, of bands, and but the reason they're parodies and cliches is because that's what it's really like. And
Right.
you have those where you've got a band where you have a prima donna who is
Yeah.
whilst they can drag the band to success, actually holding the band together for a long time doesn't happen, does it? And that's where you get the arguments, disagreements, and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
And it's the same with a project. If you've got a project manager or in a business generally, if you've got someone who is just about them
Yeah.
and doesn't allow that sort of others to step to the front and get the support from the others, that immediately, I can really see the correlation there.
Yeah, exactly. But you also think of but then if you think of the bands where everyone plays a really critical role, and one band I think about that I listened to, I think I probably listened to them in college. Definitely after college, I heard them because the bass player's a singer, and I think the drummer passed away not too long ago.
You're
But
going to say
it's the
Rush.
band Rush.
Yeah. As soon as you said that,
Yeah,
yeah,
but if you
amazing
think
band.
about what allowed them to have such a long-standing
Yeah.
career,
Yeah.
is that you had three people. You had a bass player, a guitar player, and a drummer. Every one of them were phenomenal on
Yeah.
their instrument, but when they played together, it sounded like there was more than three people on stage.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they all knew obviously they all knew their instrument, they all knew their part, but they all played well together.
Yeah. Yeah.
And each one of them had their moment in the sun, and everybody else supported them. And so that led them to create this phenomenon that we call Rush, that so many that people loved, right?
Yeah.
And they really enjoyed the whole concept of them working together. And really, I think that's what it is. It's like for an organization within small teams, that if you can create that same vibe, which there are skills and techniques of which you can use to create those concepts and those experiences within a team to really make things work.
Yeah. I think that just that, as you say there, with Rush, I'm a Rush fan. Seen them, and Neil Peart is just incredible. Neil Peart was the reason that I liked them. Just I saw them on the Exit Stage Left video, and the drumming on that song is just on where Neil Peart does his drum solo, and the fact
Yeah,
that you've got the rest of the team step back and let him take, was it 10 minutes long, that solo or whatever it is, and
right,
that takes all of the adulation, doesn't it? And
right,
that's being in a band. As part of that is that appreciation from the band as part of what every musician is going to feed off, and
exactly.
having the confidence in each other to know that, one, you're going to be supported doing that for something that big. And the same with I suppose with a business, with a project, with anything like that. If you've got
Yes,
that relationship where the person who's getting the chance to
yes.
shine rather than it, you know what I mean? It's a unusual um, area where you can just sit back and everyone gets their day in the sun, sort of thing.
Yes. In fact, in my book, I have a chapter that's related to that, and it's called Surrender to Support. And I actually highlight another bass player who I've actually gotten to know, and I would say became an acquaintance of mine. His name is David Dyson. Now, David has played with Gerald Albright, Najee, Mesa, Jonathan Butler, just some phenomenal jazz musicians
Mm.
in their own right. But the thing about David is that he initially first started off. He went to Berklee College of Music, but even before then, when he started around playing around 12 years old, he I would say by the time he was 14, and I talk about this in my book, he was playing weekend studio gigs as a teenager, making $50 an hour, making $50 a session, recording music.
Yeah.
And what he learned from that, and going to college at Berklee, and then working with Walter Beasley, was that to be a great bass player means to provide that support, and that it's okay to be surrendered to,
Yeah.
just to that your role is to lay down the groove and to support the band. Now, he became a composer, he became the music director, he had all these other roles that he led, but when it came to performing, he would have times where he would solo, but the majority of the time, if you ever watch any of the videos or any things about him, and in fact, I have a link to a video in my book about him. um, he simply sits back on the songs that he wrote, and he just plays the bass line.
Yeah.
And he's slapping the bass, like your T-shirt says. He's
Yeah.
he's slapping the bass, and he's just laying down the bass line, and really, setting the tone for the music. Never takes a solo, never takes
Mm.
a solo in this clip, and the music is just like wow.
Yeah.
And in fact, I think it was a concert that they were uh, um, um, brought into the R&B Hall of Fame up in Detroit at
Wow.
Motown. And so, but you think he would want to stand out and shine, but
I
no,
know.
his role at that time was, hey, this song is the right song. I wrote it, but I'm not even taking the solo. I'm just playing the bass on it. But and he is like now one of the hardest working bassists um, in I would say around today. And
Mm.
one of the reasons is that everyone who hires him knows that he's going to be there to support them. He's
Yeah.
going to lay down the bass track, and they're going to give him his moment to shine. But they know that that's not what gets him off. That's not what gets him going. What gets him going is being there to support the band and really lay down the tracks. And so it's pretty amazing when you think about it. And one of the things I talk about too is the neuroscience, because what I see is, you can have project management skills to do the things that project managers do, but when you understand the neuroscience of how people operate, then it also allows you to use some of the soft skills or your communication skills in a way to pull the team together. And the reason I decided to use a lot of neuroscience is when my son was growing up, I watched him go through some challenges. And so it made me inquisitive about neuroscience. So I started doing a lot of reading. Didn't go to medical school or anything, but I just read a lot of books about
Yeah.
neuroscience. Then I read a book called Conversational Intelligence, and it was really focused on the concept of culture, right? The concept of culture and how conversations drive relationships and how relationships drive culture. And if you know, as a project manager, you can have the software, you can have all the technology, you can have the business team, but if the end user for which you're building this project for doesn't accept your project, doesn't accept the solution that you're rolling out because it doesn't fit their culture, then you got a failed project. Even though, the surgery was successful, but the patient died. You've
Yeah.
heard that one before,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Well, it happens in project management.
Oh
And
yeah.
sometimes one of the main reasons it happens, and this gets me excited because I think a lot of project managers really need to understand this, is that one of the main reasons that it happens is that people forget about thinking through what's the cultural impact on the end user. Because as a project team, many times we're not interfacing with the end user.
Hmm.
We're interfacing with the business owner,
Yeah.
and they may have a trainer, or we may have a trainer on our team, and they go out and they do the training, and they're talking to the end users, right? But as a team, we're kind of focused on making sure the main person's happy, who's going to sign the check or who's going to approve the project. But if
Yeah.
they're not the end user, then we may actually build something and roll something out that they're not going to embrace. And so by focusing on the cultural aspect and the conversational aspect and ensuring that what I'm going to build and what I'm going to roll out is going to be adopted and accepted by the end user, then I know I'm going to have a successful project, even if there's some technical challenges.
Yeah.
As long as I know they're going to accept it and they're open to it.
Yeah. Yeah. I get that, and it's. I think it is that thing of and I'm going to repeat myself because I do quite regularly. This
That's
thing I
okay.
like to say is that we have the time, cost, quality. We've got
Yep.
all the tools that we talk about that how to get the time, cost, quality.
Right.
But again, that's the the basics. It's the sculptor knowing how to sculpt something. It's the sculptor knowing
Right.
how to use a hammer and how to use a chisel. But then you've got actually, just because you can use the chisel and you can use the hammer,
Right.
doesn't mean what you're carving is good. You may use all of the techniques, the feathering, the whatever you
Yes.
do, but if that's not what people wanted to be, if you have a sculpture of an elephant and someone's wanted a sculpture of a penguin, that it doesn't matter. And
Right.
also, it's about that art, isn't it? It's and I always say that about the fact that it's the anyone can learn the skills to sculpt, but once you've
Right.
learned them, then you've got to learn how to put the art into it, and it draws it to music as well. You learn your scales, you learn the basics, you can do all that
Right.
stuff. Well, I haven't, I just messed around with it, but you know what I mean. You do if you do it sensibly, you learn those tools.
Right.
And then, as a friend of mine, who's a great guitarist, I'll give him a shout out, Spud, and he was talking to someone once, and he said, "Yeah, that's it." And who was learning the all the chords, all the perfect, and he said, "You kind of got to get a bit dirty with it now. Now you know what you can do.
Right.
Now you got to break them rules to where you know where you can break the rules a little bit or bend the rules, and that's the same sort of thing, isn't it? It's not just one way or the other. You've just got to go and blend with all the rules and break them a little bit.
Exactly, exactly. I kind of look at, and I got this idea listening to a book by Victor Wooten and one of his books on music lessons. And Victor is an amazing bass player, a five-time Grammy-winning bassist. I got a chance to meet him at a Gerald Beasley bass boot camp up in Philadelphia area, where I've just been introduced to a ton of really interesting bass players, and again, just being inspired to continually grow, no matter how gray the hair gets or how old you get, right?
Well, yeah, yeah. You don't
but
stop learning. You don't.
exactly, you never stop learning. But one of the things that he did, and I love this analogy, and it is, learning music is like learning a language. It's like learning to speak. When we learn a language, let's say we grow up and both of us are speaking English. I know you're in Europe. I'm in the United States now. In the United States, we're pretty bad at this. It's like a majority of us only know English, right? If we're lucky, we because Mexico or Spain is yeah, Mexico rather is close to us. We've learned some Spanish, but other
Yeah.
than that, unless you've been brought up, in an environment where you had someone who spoke another language like French or whatever, you really don't learn those languages. Now,
Well,
if
the
we're
the Brits are just as bad. When in many cases, most of us Brits, when we try to learn another language, it includes volume rather than anything else. You say the same thing louder, and that kind of
just
works there.
louder.
And I would argue, just for some of my colleagues in the UK, that I'm not sure you guys do speak English over there. So
But you get what I'm saying. But
yeah,
for
you're
other
right.
parts
Yeah,
of Europe, I'll put it that way.
yeah.
You
You're right.
you tend to speak multiple languages. Well, here's the thing that I'm trying to get to is when you're growing up and you're learning to speak a language, what do? Well, you're this infant that
Yeah,
is like you're hearing a language a lot. But every day, every second, every hour, you get to practice with professionals,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
You
That's
get your
fair.
mom, your dad, you have your siblings, your brothers and your sisters, aunts and uncles and cousins, and everyone is going to come and talk to you.
Yeah,
And very soon you develop the mindset or the neuroscience or the neurons to be able to speak the language, and you're kind of flubbing the language and you're not ever saying everything right, but no one ever makes fun of you. They just kind of correct you and keep talking and keep speaking, and everything is about the language, and pretty soon you become pretty versed in the language. Then you learn the dialogue, you learn, like you
yeah,
said, you get dirty with it, you learn all the nuances and all the, how to combine certain words to
yeah,
fit where you grew up at and so on. They can tell which part of the country you're from based on how you speak.
yeah, yeah,
um, and then you go to school and then you learn the mechanics,
yeah,
right? And so a lot of learning to play jazz is the same way. It's really, finding, it's putting yourself in a place where you get to work with professionals, and if you can't work with them personally, well, you can listen to their records and you can play along with their records, you can learn their solos. So jazz is like a language. Well, project management and some of the skills that we have to learn in project management, at first for me it was like learning a whole new language. Gantt chart, bar
yeah,
chart, or just all the different parts of what goes into understanding, project management, all the technical um, aspects of project management. But then once you master those and once you have a good handle on those things, and for me, just also, I would say when I was learning project management, I'd use the mindset, and this is where music has played a big role in my life. I use the concepts of how I learn music to learn other things. So, for
right.
instance, as I said, when you're learning jazz, you're learning a language. And how do you learn that language? Well, you put yourself around other experts who speak that language so you can pick up on the nuances. So when I got into project management, I read every book so I could listen to the language of project management. I watched every podcast or every webinar that I could get my hands onto. I joined the Microsoft Project User Group because I used a lot of Microsoft Project at the time. In fact, I became the president of Microsoft Project User Group in the Baltimore, DC area for 9 years. So every month I was going to an event, a networking event, where I was talking shop with other people who spoke my language, and they would speak the language in a more sophisticated way. And I didn't know about that. And so again, I use the concepts. So sometimes the idea of the workplace jazz is not that I'm playing music with my clients. It's that I'm using the concepts that I've learned as a musician to introduce them that, hey, here's a natural way to actually develop some of these other skills to help you even grow faster and to create better teams. And so that was how I learned project management, and a lot of other things that I did with project management and business intelligence and so on and so forth was to embrace myself, put myself around, and find mentors, find
Yeah.
guys that who wrote 5 or 6 books or a couple of books. And as I wrote my first book, reach out to them and build relationships and network with them, interview. And I did a podcast for a while and interview them. And so what happens is, by doing that, you naturally begin to learn how to use those tools and skills in a way that if you're just kind of doing it by the book and taking the test, that you're going to limit yourself in what you can
Yeah.
really do.
Yeah, it just gives you a part of it, doesn't it? And it's that finesse, isn't it? That's
Exactly.
brilliant. Yeah, yeah. That's yeah. I really understand that. I think just the one I was looking through the book
Uh-huh.
earlier, and the bit that I was reading at the time was around the purposeful practice
Yes.
sort of section, and that kind of gives it. It kind of joins up with that conversation that you've got there, isn't it? As well, is that well, get you to say it, but my kind of way I interpret it, I do.
Go
The
ahead.
thing that caught my eye also was the kata, because I do martial arts, and it kind of like, oh, yeah.
Yes.
And just the fact that when you are practicing something, whatever it is,
Right.
just practicing it for the sake of practicing it isn't isn't good enough, is it?
Right.
You've got to
No.
practice it for a specific reason.
Right.
And I know I'm in the last 18 months, I've always wanted to play guitar. I've got a guitar there that I've never been able to play properly, and the best investment I've had in the last 18 months is £20, sort of, I don't know, $15, $16 or whatever it is. Maybe it's about equal these days. I don't know the exchange rate, but I bought a small 3/4 acoustic guitar. It's
Okay.
from an eBay person. It's a
Okay.
make that no one has ever heard of. I think I've found one page on Google that even has it mentioned, and it's just this little guitar, and I've started messing about with it and learning the odd few chords, because I said to you earlier, I'm inherently lazy. So going through all the thing of learning all the chords and all that stuff, I've got my kids and wife who are learning piano and doing all the
Right.
scales, and I'm just like, right, strum, strum. Oh, that sounds okay. Strum, strum. All right, I want to play this song. Right, find the chords. Them are weird. I got a duff finger. I can't play that chord. Right, how do I make it sound? And I kind of what's an easy C or whatever, and do those sort of things. And one of the best investments of 20 quid I've spent, because it's changed my sort of relationship with the guitar, in that I
Yeah.
can pick it up now and just mess about with it now.
Yes.
Whereas the only way I could do that normally is if I tuned it to open D, and then I could play it that way. But I've
Right.
discovered so much in the last, especially with lockdown.
Yeah.
I've discovered quite um, a new a reinvigorated love for music, if you like, that
Right.
I've lost over the years of work and beer and women and family and things like that. Where when I was a 20-year-old 30 years ago,
Yeah.
being the next uh, uh, famous bass player in a band was probably one of the major things I was hoping to be. Um, and we're never good enough to be anything like that. But it's funny how that, and what I've been going back around in a very long circle there, was that I found myself picking it up and just doing stuff, and I kind of
Yeah.
getting to the point now where I need to be thinking about what I'm doing to
Right.
be able to improve it, to say, right, I'm doing this because.
Right.
So just on that topic, talking about, do you want to just have a chat about how you
Yeah.
see that and how that applies to us getting that, getting in the workplace and with improvising in the workplace?
Exactly. Well, the whole the whole concept of the improvised framework, it starts off with improving, right?
Mhm.
It's like improving your skills, but improving them through what I call deliberate practice, or what science calls deliberate practice. And in fact, it is a scientific phenomenon that experts, the thing that separates a person who becomes an expert is that they go about practicing in a very deliberate way. In other words, wherever they are right now, they start working on material that's a little bit of outside their reach.
Mm. but not
So
too
they
far.
have to
Yeah.
struggle. So it's like so if you're working with a coach or a teacher, every so often, it could be every month or every week or every 2 months, that you develop and you grow yourself to a certain point that you can play a piece. The teacher is going to ask you and say, I'm going to introduce you to another piece, and it's going to be technically and musically a little bit outside your skill set. Now if he gave you a piece up here, now that
Yeah.
would be very discouraging, and you'd be like, okay, this is not going to happen. I'm never going to be able to do this. But if when 1 year or within a couple of weeks you go from here, and then you go here, and then you go here, and then pretty soon what you find yourself is you're getting better, you're becoming more accomplished, and now the piece of music that he wanted to introduce you to, he can now give you that piece of music, and guess what? It's only a small wrong away from your current skill set compared to maybe a couple of years ago when it was way away,
Yeah.
way out of the waters from where you were. And so that concept in music that we use to develop our skills, we can use the same concept in business.
Yeah.
It's a simple. It's like kata. I talk about in the
Mm.
book, which is like the karate concept of how do you learn the basic principles of karate, and it's that concept of kata that you have, but you also have to kind of fall in love with practicing. And I think that's the challenge
Yeah.
that most people have to deal with. But here's one thing I discovered, and I talk about it in my TEDx talk, and that is, and if you think about it, it's really true. It's either 95 to 90% of the time, even as a professional musician, if you're working, let's say you're an orchestra, or you're working in a band that's playing 5 nights a week, and you're playing 2, 3 hours a night. When you add up the rest of the time of your week and the rest of the time that you're preparing and doing things, you're spending 90% or 95% of your time practicing or preparing.
Yeah.
And you're only on stage, let's say maybe 10% or 5% of the time of your life on stage, which means, okay, great. So if you get all your jollies and your joy from being on stage, and your accolades and your feel goods from being on stage,
It's
then the
not
other
enough.
times you're kind of struggling.
Yeah. It's not
But if
enough, is it?
Right, but if you fall into the mindset of, hey, I'm gonna love working through the process and developing my skills and practicing and growing, then not only am I enjoying the 5 to 10% of the time, but I'm also enjoying the 90% of the time where I'm preparing. And what I found is that really good, not only musicians, but athletes, business consultants, or business professionals, whoever, the ones who really become great at what they do, they don't, they don't, they're not in the place where they just love the performance, right? They love the whole process. They love the practice. I mean, if
Yeah.
you think of, in America, we have football, and I know in Europe and the rest of the world you have football, and it's
Yeah.
different thing, right? But in either case, um, the footballers are only on the
Yeah.
field a very small period of time. The rest of their time, it's conditioning, it's weight training, it's running, it's all the other stuff that goes into it. And let me tell you, if you don't love all of that other stuff, you're not going to be good on Sundays for an hour,
No.
or
No.
you're not going to be good on whatever night that you're going to play soccer and for that period of time. But it's when you're great at the practicing, and you change your mindset about practicing and preparing, that you fall in love with the performance.
Yeah, it's really interesting because kind of joining, there's about four things that popped off on my head there. You got when you get into the soccer and football thing, you've got the stories of and rugby in the UK. You've got the
Right.
story of
Yes.
David Beckham and of Jonny Wilkinson. The
Okay.
two, and for my Welsh friends, it was just local. Recently, Wales just beat England at the rugby over the weekend. So, well done, Wales, through gritted teeth there. But those, both of those two guys I know, with David Beckham was an incredible free kick taker, and
Right.
Jonny Wilkinson kicked England to World Cup glory. And the time that they would spend kicking, the rest of the teams would be off the pitch, and then they would spend hours ball in the same place, same kick, ball in the same kick, and that, and say in order to do that, you've kind of got to have that kind of Zen-like um,
Yeah.
ability, and just enjoy that every time that you get it just right as you're planning to, and enjoy it then, not when you.
Right.
So and it becomes, I suppose, the whole thing then is also, and it's one of the things I taught to my little one about her practice on the piano, and I practice with judo as well, is that you don't practice till you get it right. You practice till you can't get it wrong.
Exactly.
And that's where you want to be, isn't it? And that's where the
Right.
expert is that the times that you get it wrong is so rare that
Right.
it's not worth bothering about. And that's where you've got to get to that point. And then
Right.
with the from the business point, there's a podcast I've listened to for, I think they're going 15 years now, Manager Tools, out of
Okay.
Texas, a couple of guys, brilliant podcast for anyone who's listening. Um, uh, I urge everyone I know to listen to it, but they are passionate about management and
Okay.
every aspect of management. And I've heard them say about the fact that management and successful leadership of teams, most of it is management. And there's the bits where you're being able to motivate someone and have a conversation with someone about motivating, or there at the celebration when you're going in, or that cut and thrust where you all got together to try and get that delivery.
Yes.
Those are the kind of, like you say, they're on stage moments, aren't they?
Right.
The rest of it is, have we done that? Have we checked that? Have we done this process? And with management, it's like, are you okay? Meeting with the person,
Yeah.
understanding where they're going, developing that person, and it's in quotes boring, and it's run of the mill type stuff, but that's the bedrock as
That's
well.
right. Exactly.
And
Exactly.
if you don't do those bedrock items, and that's your practice, isn't it? If you like,
It is. It
ready
really.
to get yourself in that space.
It really is, and it requires. You mentioned something called like a flow state that you find yourself in
Mm,
when you're saying you're practicing, right? And if you think about it, when you're really practicing and you get into playing music, you find yourself in kind of like this flow state.
yeah,
And another thing I found that was really interesting in researching this book was that, and again, like I said, each section of it, I do talk a little bit about the neuroscience of that particular concept. Like for practicing, I talk about the neuroscience of deliberate practice and what does the brain go through and how does the brain operate when we deliberately practice something compared to just practicing something. It's
yeah,
really interesting, and so I'll leave it there so you can check it out.
yeah,
But the other thing that I did learn was that as musicians, one of the things that we get as a benefit of being a musician, whether you're an amateur or a professional, is whole brain integration. And what whole brain integration is when your brain gets to a point into a flow state. In other words, it gets to start operating at a point where it's processing very fast, but things slow down. And if you ever hear a footballer, definitely I hear it in American football. I haven't listened to that many, I would say, soccer or rugby interviews, but I definitely hear it when I hear American footballer who says they came out of college and when they got into the professional game, the game was so fast,
yeah,
right? Because everybody there is like, extremely quick, no matter how big they are, whatever. But after the second or third year, one of the things they always say is the game slowed down.
mm,
Well, what happened? Well, the game didn't slow down, their brains sped up to process, so it looks like the game is slowed down, that they can kind of now see how everything's happening, but their brain is sped up. Well, through the whole process of performing and practicing music, it speeds up our brain. And because we're using the logical side, we're trying to figure out where we're putting our fingers at, we're looking at the music, we're trying to decode what's on the page, we're using our right side, which is the creative side. So now we have both sides of the brain
yeah,
talking to each other, and there's this thing in the middle called the corpus callosum that is like a bunch of fibers that connect the superhighway of the right and left hemisphere. And so as you're practicing music, your entire both sides of the brains are operating, plus they're communicating with each other. So even if you're an amateur musician, you develop the benefit of whole brain integration, which means your brain gets used to working at a faster pace, but in a calmer manner, more
yeah,
efficiently. Now, again, that's what happens to world-class athletes because they've been doing it for so long. Their brains are now working at a faster pace, and but yet they can it slows down so they can
Yeah,
really see
switch it
the
on.
whole field and see things. Well, we can do that in business as well. We can do that with whatever skill you're going after. If you focus on deliberate practice, but also if you do things like meditation.
Yeah. Mm.
Now, so let's say you're not inclined to go and become a musician, or you have no desire to become a musician. If you just simply practice meditation or guided meditations on a regular basis, that will produce the same effect in your brain, which is it allows the brain to become more efficient and speed up at the same time, slowing down and become more efficient and using its energy and the thought process, which I thought was pretty amazing. That you
Yeah.
could develop that without being a musician or being a world class athlete simply by meditating.
Yeah, I think it's about it's that whole thing, isn't it, of teaching your brain to do it, isn't it? And
Exactly.
you using three different tools there to teach it, really, if you'd like. You've got the fact that in the sports arena, it's kind of necessity for panic and survival in some ways. If you're the quarterback,
Yeah.
yeah, you need that whole field to be running really slow, don't you, in order to be able to have that time to process
You
and
see that
decide.
that 300-pound guy coming at you
Yeah, yeah.
full force.
Survival is what it's done there. Whereas the music, there's a different driver for it. And again, the sort of meditations a different drive. It's funny because
Exactly.
I've never I kind of thought about it, but not thought about it before now. But I have. Um, as I say, I do judo as a martial art, and when I've
Yeah.
competed, when we're training at the club, and you do open sparring, it's just what it is, and it's a bit of a laugh,
Right.
and it's good, and it can be hard.
Yeah.
But when you're in a competition, um, the 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 switch is different. It always feels incredibly long that you're on the mat.
Yeah.
And then when you go back and watch back a video to see how well you've done, and it's 90 seconds, and it feels like you've been on there for 3/4 of an hour or whatever, you'll get a video of it, and it's nothing, whether you
Right.
win or lose. But also, I do remember there are a couple of times where I felt, hang on, I'm thinking about what I'm going to do next.
Yes.
I'm waiting, I'm watching, I'm waiting for someone to do something. So and then I've done what I was going to do, and it's usually come out all right. But it's not doesn't happen that often. But occasionally I get that little spark of, obviously in a similar sort of thing where
Like a
my
flow
brain
state.
is operating quicker
Yes.
than real terms. Therefore, it feels like everything's slowed down, and
Yes.
it's very surreal feeling I found, because
Yes.
it was one of those ones you sit there going, yeah, I've got loads of time here. Whereas normally I'm going, ah, and it's kind of like, it's, it's, it's interesting the way you say it, is you get those different ways of getting into that flow state. And I know that, like with you say, just messing around playing with the guitar, and sit there and you think, oh, how long have I been messing around? And it can be a
Yes.
long time, because you're
But you
just
get lost
riffing
in
with
it.
it. Yeah, yeah. And
You, you do
and I,
you,
go on, sorry, yeah.
no, I was just saying you do get lost in it.
Yeah. And I find it a very good therapeutic outlet, if you like that. And again, with the martial arts, and I've started doing some running, like I've been doing some running, and I find all of those sort of things that where you kind of got to focus on the process, because if you
Yeah.
don't focus on the process, like on the judo mat, you end up on your backside.
Yeah.
um, on the guitar, it kind of goes clang, but it's kind of, what I mean, you've kind of got those process things that you're working on,
Yes.
and that's where your focus is, rather than something way down, isn't it? You're just what's in front of you at the minute. Where are my fingers going? And in order
Right.
for it to work, that singleness of focus, and the meditation, that kind of aligns to that, and it kind of, yeah, I can see how it all intertwines in all those. They're
Intertwines
all
and works together.
meditative activities, aren't
Exactly.
they? Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, yeah. It's fascinating, fascinating. Just so thinking about your book.
Uh huh.
uh, Obviously you've got 9 steps in there. Do you want to
Yep.
just quickly, briefly say, right, these are the 9 steps, have a chat on that? And I don't know what your time, no, we've been nearly talking for an hour now. And
Yeah.
I imagine you've
Yeah. I
got,
figured we'd land this plane here soon here,
yeah, I
but
was thinking,
yeah,
I
I
can
can share.
chat all night if, for that thing, but I'll probably get people annoyed in the house, but But yeah, do you want to just
Well,
give us a
I'll
quick?
just
Yeah,
share about the nine
yeah,
steps. So basically, the nine steps of the improvised framework are one to improve because and that's where the deliberate practice comes in at. The next thing that you want to do is you want to measure. You want to measure what you're trying to improve because you want to be able to track it. And if you think about it, for bass players, when we're playing, measuring is am I on time? Do I
mm,
play on time? Am I on time like to the rehearsals and everything else? But am I playing on time in the groove, in the pocket? Are people going to bop their heads and tap
yeah,
their feet? Is it measurable? The next thing is positivity. You know, developing a positive attitude, and how does that impact the team? As I said earlier, a lot of my book I talk about some of the neuroscience and what happens when you're positive and you have a positive conversation. My brain and your brain begins to produce dopamine, serotonin, and GABA, and oxytocin, which are positive neurochemicals, and they're feel good neurochemicals. So we walk away from the conversation feeling, man, that was a great conversation. But if we're not positive and it's a negative and it's a stressful conversation, then your brain, my brain, starts producing cortisol and testosterone. We start feeling fight or flight. We start feeling stress. We end up with a pain in our neck, and it's like the power of conversations and our attitude will determine what type of neurochemicals your brain produces.
yeah,
And so knowing that as a project manager, I can produce positive meetings, or I can see if there's someone in a meeting who's negative, how to curtail what's going on and kind of lead it towards more of a positive meeting, because I know if I allow that to happen, then it's going to impact everyone in the room, and everybody's going to walk out feeling tense, frustrated, and they're not going to feel like this is a great team. But if I can get everybody to be positive, then it's going to produce the positive things. Then we talk about risk to reward, about risk management, and how you do have to take risks, but you have to take calculated risks. And sometimes you have to take risks based on your skill set, the fact that you've practiced, the fact that you've been doing the work, and you trust your team and yourself, and you're gonna manage it, but you're gonna put a risk out there and go for it to try something new. You're going to be open to feedback. You're looking for feedback. You want, because again, I talk about how the highest paid people in the world love feedback. If you think
yeah,
about it, every person who is at the top of their game in sports, guess one thing they have in common. They all have a coach.
yeah. That's true. Yeah,
You know what I mean? And that
yeah,
it's like, wait a minute, this guy's the best in the world. Why does he need a coach? Because if that coach can help him get like a second better, if he take one stroke off of his game, if he can help him kick the ball a little bit more to the right, that may mean millions of dollars for that athlete just by
yeah,
getting an inch, an ounce better. Then visualization, being able to visualize your future, being able to visualize what your team's going to go, casting a vision for where you want your team to go, but literally spending time, getting your team to spend time thinking, what kind of team do we want to create? What kind of atmosphere do we want to create? Visualize it, see it happening. The next thing is being inspired for aspirations. It being inspired is different from aspirations. If I'm inspired, I'm excited about something. If I have an aspiration, I see myself being something that I wasn't before. I want to grow into something, right? And then the whole idea of what we talked about earlier, which is surrender to support. And then it kind of rounds it out with execution excellence. Just really being able to execute, getting things done, having a process for getting things done. But if you have all these other things in place, then the idea of executing on an excellent manner is pretty much in the bag, because you visualized it, you got the positive attitude, you've been practicing, you've been measuring, you've been priming everything. It's kind of like, it's like everything else is that 90%, and that 5% is that execution. But if you've been doing all the 90, then the execution is going to be the easy part.
yeah.
So that's basically what the book is about, and it's really teaching the concepts. And it has stories that teach the concepts, as well as the processes and some neuroscience that teach the science behind it. But it's basically, what are the things that these jazz ensembles do to create this amazing music that we can learn and create amazing projects for our clients.
Fabulous.
That's basically the premise of the book.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for that. And if people want to get hold of it, it's out now?
Yeah, it's definitely, yeah, it's out. It's actually available globally in bookstores, and the publisher's website is Business Expert Press, or you can go to the book's website, which is workplace-jazz.com. That's
Okay,
workplace with a dash jazz.com, and you can learn all about the book and endorsements of the book. There's a podcast. There's some music. I've done 3 singles working with a
oh,
producer, and so there's some music out there, and there's an e-learning course as well, and then other information about how to get the book, and just some great things that I'm doing with podcasts and blogging and some other
brilliant.
writing that I'm doing there. So
Superb, superb.
excellent.
Well, thank you very much, Gerald, for your time and entertaining. I could have geeked out talking music all night and talking with my limited experience and expertise,
No, it was a great
and
conversation.
trying to
Thank you.
learn from an expert would be fantastic again, and following your advice of mixing with people who know what they're talking about and know what they're doing. Um, and yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much, and I hope you can have a wonderful rest of the day, whatever you're going to get up to.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank
And
you.
yes, all the best.
Cheers.